Hiroshima was dropped before the meeting took place.
Because there's been a huge issue from the side of the defense whether the Japanese could prolong the war, could you answer, did the Japanese have enough food supplies and weapons to continue such a costly war?
No, Japan definitely could not continue such a costly war for long. Food supplies, as well as weapons, oil, and ammunition were all running extremely low for the past few months of this war, since America cut off all of Japan's trade and bombed a lot of our military bases as well as our agricultural areas.
Colonel, since you were part of the military, when do you know Japan would surrender if the A-bomb was not dropped?
Japan could only fight off one more land strike. If America had attempted a second land strike, Japan would fall. Even if a land strike didn't occur, though, Japan was already, as mentioned before, considering surrender. Also, Japan was willing to surrender if the United States modified the terms of the Potsdam Declaration.
All right, now let's regard the leaflet that has been brought up. Did you have a warning before the bomb was dropped in both Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Yes, we did have a warning from America before the A-bombs were dropped. The warning was little leaflets that America dropped by planes all over 33 Japanese major cities. This was our warning. No one expected nor knew that America had such a powerful bomb, and these leaflets did not even specify that such a powerful bomb was going to be dropped. In addition, these leaflets asked that the Japanese people should leave their homes and evacuate their cities, something completely irrational, considering the fact that almost every city could have been a target. So where could the people have went if they evacuated their homes? What would they eat? And they would have a greater chance of dying if they had evacuated.
So the warning was ineffective, as you said. But let's continue. Was the third-day period between each bomb enough time for the Japanese to consider the unconditional surrender?
No, the 3-day period between the two bombs was definitely not enough, considering the fact that the process of holding a Supreme Council Assembly is not simple at all. It actually took 6 days to come to the final decision of unconditional surrender after the bombing of Nagasaki.
And one last question, Your Honor. Can you explain to us, Colonel Hayashi, what is the difference between the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and the American attack on Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
The difference between the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and the Hiroshima and Nagasaki is that we did not target civilians. We targeted a military base, whilst Mr. Truman destroyed 2 whole cities and killed mainly civilians. The attack on Pearl Harbor was an ordinary airstrike, while the attack on Hiroshima was unprecedented, since in this attack, the first ever to be used atomic bomb during war period was tried against a real target, such as the cities and the people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The contemplation that military targets were mainly aimed at in both cities does not stand a chance, because everybody knows that both cities were far from being big military centers and had no important or secret military bases. This attack was not only predetermined, but actually lifted the curtains exposed to the atomic bomb to the whole world.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Defense, your witness.
You believed that the Japanese were going to surrender, did you not?
Yes.
But Japan was warned and given the opportunity to surrender with a Potsdam Proclamation, right?
Yes, but as I said before...
Yes, they were given opportunity to surrender. That's it.
Yeah, they were.
Okay. You said this: we were prepared to stage the decisive battle on the Japanese mainland right before the end of the war. We thought it would be able to beat the Americans on their first landing attempt. So, in a time of loss, Japan still thought they could beat the Americans.
This is before the 2 bombs were dropped.
Right.
And Japan believed that if America had attempted one more land strike, they would be able to fight it off. But if they decided to have a second land strike, then Japan would be forced to surrender.
Okay,
which means that a lot less
so America
casualties.
was supposed to wait and keep attacking Japan until they finally surrendered. I mean, this is a little irrational,
No,
in
what
my
I
opinion.
said before was that there was already an assembly that was, the Emperor Hirohito already had called up an assembly that was going to discuss surrender.
Right. Okay. If the atomic bombs were not used by President Truman, he was going to follow the Operation Downfall. And Japan's geography made this plan obvious to the Japanese as well. They knew where Americans would attack if this was going to be the case. So Japan had an operation as well, and it was called Operation Ketsugo.
Yes.
Right? Okay. Which was Japanese plan, an all-out defense on Kyushu. So Japan had plans of attack.
They had plans of defense.
No. They were going to fight.
They were going to fight in order to defend their mainland and their country and their people.
Okay, so how... Yeah, but they didn't say they were going to surrender. They were going to keep fighting.
They were going to try to defend one more land strike, and after that, if they could not, if America and Russia, who was going to join in,
Okay.
Continued, then they would surrender.
All right, sure.
Two more
There's
questions,
no
please.
substantial evidence for this, though, so...
There is.
Really?
Objective, unargumentative.
Yes, if you have a question, please ask a question, but
Okay.
do not suppose.
So if the war was going to continue, do you deny the fact that continuing the war would have extremely high casualties on both sides?
Nowhere near as a... That is hypothetical.
I'm going to overrule. I want to hear what his opinion is on the matter if they had continued to fight.
Can you repeat your
Yeah.
question?
Do you deny the fact that continuing the war would have extremely high casualties on both sides?
Yes, I do deny the fact that there were going to be extremely high casualties. There would be some casualties, that's for sure, but compared to the casualties that there were from the two A bombs, they would be much less.
Okay. Well, this is a point of what everyone, like, what they think, because the generals, the American generals, actually predicted that there would be millions of Japanese casualties.
Do you have a
and-
question? Do you have a
These are all
question?
hypothetical.
Your final question?
Yeah. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colonel. You may be seated. Would the prosecution like to call their final witness?
Yes, the prosecution would like to call up Emperor Hirohito.
Emperor Hirohito to the stand, please.
Hello.
One moment, please.
Yes.
There's a crossword in the C camp witness. It's not happening?
Your witness.
Your Majesty, let's clarify this. Why is it that you were not tried as a war criminal after the surrender of Japan, as many of Japan's leaders were? And why were you not removed from your throne? Can you please explain?
Well, as was to be expected, many of the allies really wanted the emperor to be tried as a war criminal. However, General Douglas MacArthur, who is on the defense, strongly believed that such an act would lead to the Japanese people rising up in a rebellion that would require massive military occupation of over 1 million soldiers and vast resources to put down. Throughout the ages, the Japanese people have had an emperor who they have seen as the descendant of the sun goddess. Executing a figure as sacred as the emperor would without a doubt lead to a rebellion. For that reason, General MacArthur refused to even consider the idea. Clearly, in the end, he got his wish, but my cooperation with the Allies in this post-war period has helped lead to a smooth transition to peace and prosperity.
So your presence was quintessential for the post-war era.
Yes.
Let's continue. Emperor Hirohito, the defense has said that you have committed many war crimes. Are you aware that Japan is responsible for many war crimes, many of which were executed under your name?
I am very
Objection.
aware of this. I've
Objection.
remained untried.
One moment, please. Your objection?
Concerning the question, the defense never stated that Emperor Hirohito has committed war crimes.
Your Honor, they've stated on countless occasions that the Japanese have done the same
Yes.
as we did.
Please rephrase your question
All
so
right.
as to remove the
All right,
question.
Emperor Hirohito, are you not aware that Japan was also responsible for many war crimes, many of which were executed under your name?
I am very aware of this. I have remained untried for the reasons I previously stated, but many of the Japanese military officials have been tried, and those found guilty have been punished for their crimes by death. The fact that the United States won the war does not exempt them for their punishments for their own war crimes. President Truman must be tried and punished accordingly. The victor should not be vindicated.
Why was the unconditional surrender offered by the Allies in the Potsdam Declaration not an option?
Well, needless to say, the unconditional surrender suggested in the Potsdam Declaration meant a surrender in which Japan had no say, but had to abide by the rules set by the Allies. In the declaration, the Allies insisted that the leaders of Japan be eliminated, meaning the emperor, in order for new ones to be put into power who would, as they said, bring a new order of peace, security, and justice. This was not an option, since my people considered the emperor of Japan as a descendant of the sun goddess, and removing me from my throne would first of all insult me and humiliate me, but above all insult and humiliate the people. Japan would not have this. However, we did not have much of a choice, since we were lacking military supplies, industrial raw materials, and most importantly, food supplies. The Bushi Code of no surrender was now impossible because of the fact that we could not prolong the war much longer. I would now like to quote former President Hoover and General Douglas MacArthur with 3 quotes. Okay. On May 28th of 1945, President Hoover visited President Truman and suggested a way to end the Pacific War. I am convinced that if you, as president, will make a shortwave broadcast to the people of Japan, tell them that they can have their emperor if they surrender, that it will not mean unconditional surrender except for the militarists, you'll get a peace in Japan. You'll have both wars over. Now the second one is also from Herbert Hoover. The Japanese were prepared to negotiate all the way from February 1945 up to and before the time of the atomic bombs were dropped. If such leads had been followed up, there would have been no occasion to drop the atomic bombs. And now this third quote is from a man named Norman Cousins, who was a consultant to General MacArthur during the American occupation. When I asked General MacArthur what the decision to drop the bomb, about the decision to drop the bomb, I was surprised to learn that he had not even been consulted. What, I asked, would be his advice have been? He replied that he saw no military justification for the dropping of the bomb. The war might have ended weeks earlier, he said, if the United States had agreed, as it later did anyway, to the retention of the institution of the emperor. In other words, to keep the emperor on his throne.
So, according to this, what you have just presented in your testimony, if the Americans had guaranteed the institution of emperor, the Japanese would have surrendered.
Yes.
Objection to the question?
Excuse me?
Yes,
The Americans had in fact guaranteed that the emperor could remain. In the Potsdam
Not in the
Declaration,
Potsdam
that is
Declaration.
invalid.
This was recommended
Order
later.
in the court.
in the Potsdam Declaration, there was language that left an opening for the emperor.
Excuse me.
The language was
not.
unclear and deemed.
Order in the court. You can address that in your cross-examination. Your next question.
Emperor, why is it that Japan did not surrender even after the first bomb was utilized in Hiroshima?
Well, the answer to that is rather simple. The 2 bombings were only 3 days apart, and this 3-day period was not nearly sufficient timing to surrender. The process is not one that is simple, but rather complex and lengthy, and since the Japanese culture is not keen on surrender, the decision was even harder to make. As you probably know, the bomb Little Boy was utilized over Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, while the bomb Fat Man was dropped on Nagasaki on the 9th of August. 6 days after the bombing of Nagasaki, on the 15th of August, was when the decision was finally made and announced. As you can see, the time frame between the Hiroshima bombings and the Nagasaki bombing was half of the time period that it took for the Japanese to surrender.
I think it's clear to all. And now let's clarify the issue of the leaflet. What do you have to say about the warning pamphlets dropped all over Japan before the attacks?
These leaflets that were showered all over Japan were completely insufficient. The leaflets warned of upcoming attacks on some or all of the 35 potential targets that were listed, but they also said that they could not promise that all the potential targets would be were listed and that some may be attacked that were not on the list. Obviously, that's rather vague. Citizens were advised to evacuate the cities, but I ask you this, where were they all supposed to go? If all the cities of Japan were being threatened, then where were the people supposed to go? And how were they supposed to get there within the few days that the warning, between the warning and the bomb? Japan is an island. They had nowhere to go. Where were they supposed to go?
Your final question, please.
Yes, but before I do that, so the warning was not a warning because it told the Japanese that every single target is liable for attack. Let's proceed with the final question. Why do you think that the United States should have given a more sufficient warning to the people of Japan when you gave no warning before attacking Pearl Harbor?
Well, this is because the attack on Pearl Harbor was an airstrike like any other on a military base. The attacks in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were completely unprecedented situations, since in these attacks we were dealing with atomic bombs, which had never been used in war before. Also, both Hiroshima and Nagasaki are cities whose populations mostly consist of civilians. The ratio between civilians and military men is 6-to-1. In order to avoid civilian casualties, the United States claims was in their full intentions, a more proper and sufficient warning was required in order for them to know what they were facing.
So clearly, if diplomacy was used, we wouldn't have had the atomic bombs. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Your next question. Your cross-examination, rather.
So, you refused to surrender after the Potsdam Declaration, is that correct?
Yes.
So, the Potsdam Declaration said that justice will be brought to the war criminals and that no civilians will be enslaved or you won't be destroyed as a nation, and that as soon as our objectives were met, we were going to leave the country. Are you aware of that?
This may be so, but the Japanese people have always had an emperor on which they rely on. The Potsdam Declaration said that the emperor would be removed from his throne, which is a great insult to the people's culture.
Okay. Why, after the landing in Okinawa, why didn't you choose to surrender? I mean, pretty much you knew that the war was lost.
Well,
For you.
for the same reasons, that the terms of the unconditional surrender had not been modified, and the emperor would have been removed from his throne.
So, in order to save the emperor, you prefer you prefer to leave the people die?
The people were willing to die in order to protect their emperor.
Yeah. And in Okinawa, are you aware of the suicide cliffs where people?
I am very aware of this.
Yeah,
Yes.
people jumped off the cliffs so they won't be captured by the Americans.
Yes.
Yeah.
The people would rather die from their own hands rather than die as sitting ducks to the American soldiers.
And you previously said that in most of your witnesses said that there was no plan to evacuate because they couldn't go anywhere. Is that correct?
Yes, this is correct.
Okay. Is that correct, please?
This is very correct. Yes.
Okay. So you didn't have any plan to take him somewhere else.
First of all, you're saying.
So if you
Wait,
don't have
listen,
if you
let me
don't
talk.
have
Allow him to answer the question, please.
What you're saying is that after the warning on Hiroshima, we didn't have any evacuation plan. There was a 5-day period between the warning and the droppings of the bomb on Hiroshima. This is not sufficient time to come up with an evacuation plan. And moreover, where were they supposed to go? The people of Japan is an island. They had nowhere to go.
Next question, please.
in the Potsdam Declaration, we told you that if you don't surrender, you'll face utter destruction. So you pretty much knew what we're gonna do. So why didn't you?
We did not know what you were gonna do.
Let me finish. Why didn't you try to form an evacuation plan since you knew something could have happened to your country? I mean.
Allow him to answer the question. The war had been going on for many
5
years.
days is not more than enough time to make evacuation plans.
5 days is more than Pearl Harbor was given to evacuate.
Is that a question?
It's a statement.
Pearl Harbor is a military base. There's a difference between a military base and a civilian base. Plus, all of the cities of Japan were potential threat and targets.
Order in the
all
court.
of them were threatened. Pearl Harbor, there was a direct warning on Pearl Harbor.
Thank you.
Do you have evidence?
Wait.
Order in the court.
Yeah,
The one lawyer is asking the questions.
So surrendering was not an option for the Japanese if we didn't change the conditions and the surrender.
Yes.
So, in other words, you were willing to let your people, the Japanese.
I previously answered this question.
Yeah,
I answered this question.
Please. I'm going to give him a little bit of latitude. You have time for 4 more questions.
Yeah, you were willing to just let them die. Do you find that logical?
I answered this question previously. The people, as I said, would rather die an honorable death than die at the hands of the Americans.
Something else. You also said that the letters didn't specify about the atomic bomb. And in this letter, can you read the highlighted?
Yes.
Okay, read it.
To have just begun to use this weapon against your homeland. I'm sorry, I can't read it. The print is not very clear.
Okay, wait, I'll read it. So it says, to have just begun to use this weapon against your homeland, if you still have any doubt, make inquiry to what happened to Hiroshima when just one atomic bomb fell on the city. So you knew...
Can I see that evidence? Okay.
Okay, continues.
You pretty much knew...
Is this the warning pamphlet leaflet that was dropped on before
on
Nagasaki?
So you knew that something like that was going to happen again?
As I previously answered, we did not have enough time to officialize a surrender. There was no time to meet with the Supreme Council, which must be done. The Emperor, under the Constitution of Japan, cannot act without the advice of his ministers. Therefore, I could not act.
Okay, and something else. Wait, one second. I want to ask something. If we didn't use the atomic bombs, Operation Downfall would take place. Is that correct?
I suppose so, yes.
Yeah, okay. So the estimated casualties for the Operation Downfall were only on a 90-day on the Olympic campaign, because there were 2 campaigns. On the Olympic campaign, we would have 4,056 casualties and 109 dead or missing. And in the coronet...
They're all hypothetical, isn't it?
That is true. Do you have a question? These
Okay.
are hypothetical numbers.
So we obviously know, though, that if Operation Downfall took place, the casualties would be more than the 2 atomic bombs were...
That's not true.
Objection is sustained.
Okay.
You have another question.
And something else. You said so many times that we attack civilians.
Yes,
Is
you
that
did.
correct? Okay, so what do you have to say about the Nanking Massacre, where you entered China and you massacred about 350,000 people and raped, wait, let me finish, raped about 100,000 women, and sometimes gang rape. Do you know what that is?
Yes, I do know what that is. Thank you.
What do you have to
As
say?
I previously stated, Japan has been punished for their war crimes. The military officials found responsible were executed. I escaped punishment for the reasons I said. However, my power has been greatly limited, which is, in a way, a punishment.
Yeah, but...
Your final question.
The United States should not be exempt from their punishments for their war crimes because they won the war.
So, for my last question, so Japan was not willing to surrender until after the second atomic bomb was used. Is that correct?
That's not necessarily true. There was not enough time between the 2 bombings.
A decision can be made in
It
1
cannot be
minute.
made in that. No, it cannot.
When
Objection overruled. I want to hear what he
a
said.
decision can be made in 1 minute. I mean, if you say that, okay, atomic bomb hit Hiroshima and it caused a lot of deaths. So we know that if we don't surrender, they might use another one. So why won't you, let me finish, why won't you just surrender? I mean, is it just about you or your people?
No, as I previously said, Japan is not keen on surrender, so the decision was not easy to make. Second of all, the emperor cannot act under the Constitution of Japan without the advice of his ministers. Therefore, I could not just come up with a surrender in 1 minute, as you said just a minute ago.
Thank you.
Okay.
You may be seated.
Your Honor.
You may approach the bench. You may approach the bench, yes.
What if the Americans, that's what they had in their hands. It's like they knew that many people died. Is that hypothetical or not?
Bring it up through your witness.
But is it hypothetical?
That was.
Oh, it is.
Prosecution, you have no further witnesses on your docket. You rest your case. The prosecution rests their case. We now move to the defense. Defense, would you like to call your first witness?
We call upon Leslie Groves.
General Leslie R. Groves to the stand, please. Mr. Groves, you've been eating a little souvlaki, I can see.
Yes.
Please state your name.
Okay, I'm General Leslie Groves, Richard Groves.
General Groves, you were officially in charge of the Manhattan Project, is that correct?
Correct.
Could you please give the jury an overview of the Manhattan Project and make it clear as to what exactly this project aimed for?
The Manhattan Project was codenamed for the United States government attempt or effort to develop an atomic bomb. As a director of the project, I have to say that it was carried out in extreme secrecy. The project was initiated because many people feared that Hitler would manage to build an atomic bomb before all other nations. After Germany surrendered, however, unconditionally, in May of 1945, the United States turned its focus on the war in the Pacific. The initial goal of the Manhattan Project was conveniently transformed, and I was told that the bomb had to be constructed and tested as quick as possible.
As quick as possible?
Yes, I was told that the project had to be completed as soon as possible, for it seemed that Japan was not planning to surrender.
Are you saying that the atomic bomb was going to be used against Japan?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
And you believe such a decision is morally correct?
At a time of war, a decision such as this one should not be judged on moral grounds.
So you're saying that there would have been no different way to end the war in the Pacific?
Yes, indeed. All other resolutions had been eliminated. Operation Downfall clearly shows that an invasion of Japan would have resulted in hundreds of thousands of deaths, many more than the dropping of an atomic bomb. Besides, Japan had no intention of surrendering. At least that's what they showed. They showed no intention of surrendering. This means that we would have to resort to the use of the bomb, and the bomb would surely stun the Japanese enough and force them to surrender. I advised President Truman to use the bomb, knowing that this was the best way to defend our nation.
So you're saying that President Truman's decision to drop the bomb is justified?
Yes, it was certainly justified. As far as I'm concerned, his decision was one of non-interference, basically a decision not to upset the existing plans. But the use of the atomic bomb, in his eyes, was the best resolution. In my opinion, the war in the Pacific would not have ended if the bomb wasn't used.
Thank you very much.
Prosecution, do you care to cross-examine this witness?
You previously stated that the Manhattan Project was carried in complete secrecy, so only you and the president were mostly aware of the program. Is that true?
It wasn't only me, it was everyone that was involved, and it was more than me and the president that was involved.
How aware of the bomb do you think Truman was?
He was
Of the effects?
There were many letters sent to him, not directly from me, but I don't know, I reported to Marshall, and Marshall in turn reported to Stimson, I think, I don't know, and Stimson informed the president. He was very well informed about the radiation effects and everything else.
Mr. Groves, what did you know about the radiation?
I knew everything. I was present in New Mexico, Los Alamos, where the first atomic bomb test had taken place, and I observed everything. I've actually wrote a memorandum to Stimson describing the effects, the light, everything, and the smoke, and I even drew a picture of it.
So you were aware of the deadly results that this bomb would have?
Is that a yes or no question? Yes, I was aware, but as I said before, all other resolutions had been eliminated. It was the best way to defend our country.
Okay, I have another question. During the Trinity test, were there any precautions taken in order to protect the citizens of New Mexico?
Yes, the observers, the scientists, and me, myself, I don't remember exactly the number, but we were many miles away from the site, and we just observed from a great distance. And we made sure that the exact location of the detonation was isolated, secluded from any population.
Your final question, please.
So then why was there a family under the name of Rateliff and another one under the name of Wilson that were affected by the radiation?
I don't see your point.
Meaning there were people that were affected during the Trinity test. by the radiation?
The prosecution has to present evidence. Otherwise, this is merely an assertion.
Okay.
Unless that evidence is presented, it's merely an assertion.
One moment.
I believe what she says. I don't recall reading it, but I believe her. I just don't get her point. Like, okay, one family was affected.
You can bring it up through another witness.
Here.
Do you have a final question?
I do, but in a moment for the evidence.
Your next question, and we'll examine this.
What is the difference between the two innocent American families that were affected of that from the radiation of the test, and let's say take another two Japanese families in Hiroshima or Nagasaki?
The difference is that the two families affected by the radiation of the test, they were sacrificed. When we bombed Japan, Hiroshima or Nagasaki, either one, we did it to defend our country. It was a counterattack because the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor first.
Excuse me,
Your
has
Honor?
evidence been presented for these two families?
Yeah,
Is it valid?
I don't know.
ACS?
I'm not.
Can we also present evidence that says the exact opposite of
Yes.
what is presented?
Yes, through your witnesses, you may do that.
I don't recall reading anything like this,
Can you
but
see
okay.
it?
Do you have any further questions?
No, no further question, Your Honor.
Yours, Leslie.
To clarify for the jury, and I'll pass this document to the jury, there is evidence that there was a family 1 mile east of the canyon in which the Trinity test took place, and they did detect
Okay.
some of the radiation that fell there. Later, they were evacuated.
Do you know how reliable that source is? I don't know. I have an article, a report here, a document. It says that it's written by me. And, well, it says that no damaging effects are anticipated on the ground from radioactive materials, meaning there was no damage expected. Like they didn't know. People were isolated from the site, so I don't know. Like this doesn't hold. It's not
Thank
valid.
you. Thank you. You may be seated.
Defense
Your Honor,
calls.
can I please approach?
Yes. Defense, your next witness, please. Who would you like to call?
OP.
Defense calls upon Dr. Robert Oppenheimer.
Altitude levels in order not to harm, so no one would be harmed. And he has evidence of that.
We can see if we can bring it up to a witness.
Who is your next witness, please?
I called him up.
Robert Oppenheimer?
Robert Oppenheimer to the stand, please.
Okay. Please state your name.
I'm Robert Oppenheimer.
Concerning the bomb, were you aware of the future controversy that would occur?
Yes, my goals were primarily to advance the scientific field of atomic energy. And I realized as I took this job that the side effects of creating the bomb would be immense on the entire world. And I had great hopes that mankind would know and use this technology to its benefit. Okay.
Why did you undertake the job as director of the Manhattan Project?
Well, even before Leslie approached me, I always wanted to be with the best of the best. And while I was at Harvard, I tended to have no friends, and I used to sit up by myself to study in order to have a good future. And that was a part of the reason. I always wanted to be part of the top, and I thought the Manhattan Project was a good opportunity for me to be.
So based on that, your job was purely scientific, right?
It was, yeah, 100% scientific.
Okay, one final question. The U.S. started its nuclear program first, and it threatened the rest of the world with it. Is this true?
Yes. The United States counteracted the German nuclear, not program, the Germans first enriched uranium. And as we heard before, Einstein informed Roosevelt of the problem of this. And the United States made this program in order to defend itself in case the Germans would continue to use this technology, if they would be able to use this technology efficiently to develop a bomb. So it was...
So basically what you're saying is that the United States started the Manhattan Project as a counteractive measure to the Germans' development?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
And also, if the Germans developed this technology and it was in their hands beforehand, we would have been in grave danger since they wouldn't be so sentimental about using it.
Thank you very much.
Your witness.
Mr. Oppenheimer, as the head of the Manhattan Project and a proficient scientist, you knew significant information about the bomb, is
Yes,
that
I did.
correct? But Mr. Oppenheimer, can you tell the court here, did you know exactly how much radiation would be released? The exact number, the precise number?
No, we had a very good idea of around how much radiation would be. We didn't know exactly because we're not perfect to know exactly. We had a very good accuracy of knowing.
You had accuracy. Mr. Oppenheimer, can you please read what has been highlighted?
Okay, this is...
It's the document that you have sent.
Okay. After detonation, highly radioactive materials are produced. The activity decreases inversely with time. 1 second after detonation, there will be the equivalent of about 10 to the 12th curies of radium.
Thank you, Mr. Oppenheimer. So it seems that you knew exactly how much radiation would be released on Japan, yes, and you knew exactly the effect that this would have. This is exactly what you sent to the brigade commander. But right now you just stated that you didn't, so are you lying? You know you're under oath.
I said I did.
You said that you did not know the exact number. You said that we had a varied information.
Perfect exact number. I said we had a very good idea.
But, all right, but this shows that you knew precisely.
Objection. Technological advances had not been made to that stage.
But
I'm going to sustain that objection. Your next
excuse me, Your
question,
Honor.
please.
Yes,
I believe she's been asked.
I will continue. But Your Honor, he states a number.
Your next question, please.
Let's move to the post-war era. Isn't our government still testing nuclear bombs and trying to develop them?
Right now?
Yes, right now, after the war has ended.
Yeah, we're doing some tests with bombs, but I'm not...
Like the bikini test, where we're trying new model of bombs.
Irrelevant. How does this relate to the bombings of
I will explain immediately.
Objection overruled. Please, your next question.
And these new bombs, which cost a lot, of course, are financed by the national budget and taxpayers' money. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
So, Mr. Oppenheimer, Marshal Stalin told us that the Soviets will also acquire the atomic bomb. What do you think will happen if they also get the atomic bomb?
If they also get it...
objection? Answer calls for speculations.
Theoretical, exactly.
Yeah.
Let me assist you. Let me assist him, please.
I'm going
Your Honor,
I'm going to sustain that objection because Oppenheimer is not a political official. He's a scientist.
Yes, but I'd like to read a quote that he has written. They, referring to the scientists of the Manhattan Project, of which you're a member of, therefore envisage the possibility of an armament race that may threaten civilization.
Can I see that quote, please?
Yes. Furthermore, some are fearful that no safe system of international control can be established. And this is exactly the document, Your Honor. You can see it as well.
Can you please tell us the date that the document was
The date
written?
of this is June 26, 1945. Mr. Oppenheimer, I believe you recall this. Excuse me?
Will you please read the quote?
Yes, this was a measure of... Because Oppenheimer, after the Trinity bomb test, was a supporter.
Allow me, Mr. Oppenheimer, to ask the questions.
No, I want him to respond to
Yes,
the
yes, but I
question.
have not asked him a question. I've just made a statement.
No, I want him to answer the question.
But I've not posed the question.
Oppenheimer? No, you asked me about the quote, and I want to comment it. Oppenheimer was, after the Trinity bomb test, I was a man of two minds. I had two minds about the uses and of the bomb. And I said I wanted to control, make it like an international atomic, like a association that would control atomic weapons around the world. And after I made this, that's why I said the part over there.
Excuse me, why did you want to do this? Can you please tell us why you wanted an international cooperation?
Because I realized this opportunity was immense for the entire world, and these weapons could be used on a really large scale, and I knew the possibilities in the future of what these bombs could do. Therefore, I intended to kind of capture down and reduce the impact of these on the entire world.
Your final question, please.
So, I have no further questions. Just want to make a statement. So, the quote says that this is something that could destroy civilization.
Can I read a quote?
Yes, yes, please read it. Sorry, Your Honor. Can we please read this again? Here you go, sir.
Yeah.
From here to the end, please.
Some are fearful that is that safe or unsafe?
Excuse me? Some are fearful that no safe system of international...
Can you restate your question, please?
There has not been a question. Mr. Oppenheimer has requested to reread the quote.
Yeah. Okay. Safe system of international control can be established. They, therefore, envisage the possibility of an armament race that may threaten civilization. Yeah, we were all aware
So,
that
Mr. Oppenheimer, according to this, you also envisage a weapon that will cause an armament race that may threaten civilization. Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
The question has been answered.
It's
You
a
may be
theoretical
seated.
again.
Can the
You
lawyer
stated-
point out?
Excuse
This
me,
question
Mr.
is dismissed. Thank you. This witness is dismissed. You may be seated.
Can the
Your
lawyer-
next witness, please.
Can the lawyer please point out something? That Robert Oppenheimer's job was purely scientific.
This order in the court. There's no more testimony from this witness. Your next witness,
The
please.
defense calls upon Dwight Eisenhower.
Dwight D. Eisenhower to the stand, please.
Please state your name and position in the Second World War.
I'm Dwight David Eisenhower, and I was Supreme Commander of the Allied forces in Europe during World War II.
Can you please briefly state what Operation Overlord was?
Operation Overlord had as its final goal to liberate France and continue with this to invade Germany in order to end the war in Europe. It was one of the most complicated operations ever taken place in a war. Before the actual operation began, there were many others that whose goal was to make the Germans believe that if an operation would take place, it'd be in a completely different area. And after this was achieved, the actual D-Day, as was called, took place, and it was one of the most difficult operations to take place. However, we succeeded, and after the end of it, we were able to reach Paris and liberate France, and with only a small delay, finally invade Germany and end the war.
To what extent did the stabilization of Europe after Operation Overlord affect the Pacific Front?
Although my main concern this period was the invasion of Normandy, and I wasn't informed about the Pacific Front in a great extent, I do believe that having ended the war in Europe allowed us to send more troops in the Pacific Front, thus ending the war there more quickly.
Are you aware, what was the total sum of the American casualties during the war?
During World War II, about 16 million personnel was used, 70% of which served in the US Army. Out of these people, 292,131 died during the war. We also had 6,000 civilian casualties, and moreover, almost 750,000 were injured during warfare, and another 140,000 were listed as POWs, which mean prisoners of war.
What was your opinion about Truman's motive to drop the bomb?
As I previously stated, I was not really informed about the Pacific Front. However, when I learned about the decision to drop the bomb by Secretary of War Stimson, I gave my misgivings about it because I wasn't sure if it would actually help us not only in the Pacific Front but also in our relationships with our allies. I do believe that the Japanese would surrender eventually, but as the war turned out, I believe that it helped us save more lives.
One more question, please.
Exactly when were you informed about the decisions regarding the atomic bomb? By who, and what was your reaction?
Okay, it was in 1945. I was in my headquarters in Germany, and Secretary of War Stimson came to me in order to inform me about the government's decision to use an atomic bomb on Japan.
One last question. Based on your information, did you agree or could you have done anything to prevent it?
I don't believe I would be able to prevent it, whether I agreed or not, because my position was to take care of the war in Europe and make sure that there wouldn't be a front recreated after Germany was defeated.
Okay, no further questions.
Prosecution, your
Your
witness.
Honor, may I please approach?
Considering what Mouse was saying before, yes, source that say
Your witness.
You weren't largely concerned with what was happening in Japan because you were mainly in Europe, but you were informed by Stimson about the bomb, is that correct?
Yes.
And what were your opinions about the bomb exactly when he told you?
As I said before, I believe that whether the bomb or not was used, we would defeat eventually Japan. I didn't exactly agree with the decision. However, I would support President Truman if it came to me to utilize the bomb.
But you just said that it wasn't that good of a decision. What else would you have proposed that could have been done to have ended the war?
Could you please recite the question?
You had just stated that you did not firmly believe in the usage of the bomb, so what else would you have proposed instead?
Objection. The witness is not called as an expert testimony.
I'm sorry, I'm going to overrule that. Why else did you call this witness? She's a general. He is a general. He will answer the question.
I was not exactly informed about the warfare in Japan. I suppose that if I were to take command of the forces there and not be allowed to use the atomic bomb, I would probably continue with what the previous generals had did. I would invade Japan using mainly manpower and probably have more casualties, both American and Japanese.
Your Honor?
Your final question, please.
Then I have here a document that you could please read.
This one?
Yes.
During his recitation of the relevant facts, I have been conscious of a feeling of depression, and so I voiced to him my grave misgivings, which on the basis of my belief that Japan was already defeated and that dropping the bomb was completely unnecessary, and secondly, because I thought that our country should avoid shocking your opinion by the use of weapon whose employment was, I thought, no longer mandatory as a measure to save American lives. It was my belief that Japan was, at the very moment, seeking some way to surrender with a minimum loss of face. The Secretary was deeply perturbed by my attitude. This is basically what I already said, actually. I didn't exactly agree.
So you do not support the usage of the bomb at all, in this case?
Objection.
That's
The
what-
witness, I call upon the same objection. The witness has been asked as a testimony expert
Yes,
of
I
the
am.
Pacific, not the
I'm going to
Pacific
sustain
front.
the objection because I believe that the witness has already answered that question. Do you agree with the document, your previous statement in the document?
As a person, I agree. However, I was a general, and as a general, I had to follow the orders.
Thank you.
No other questions.
Defense, your next witness, please.
Defense calls upon George Catlett Marshall.
What is your full name and what do you do for a living, Mr. Marshall?
My name is George C. Marshall. I'm currently Secretary of State.
What was your official position during the war?
I was Chief of Staff appointed by President Roosevelt in 1939.
What is the job of the Chief of Staff?
My duty was to solve any military problems that had came up and arbitrate any disputes or issues before they had been taken to the President. To put into simpler terms, the Chief of Staff acts as an aide or an advisor of the President on militaristic subjects. I give my input and thoughts or support but I do not make any final decisions or thoughts, actions.
And what was your part in World War II, or more specifically, your affiliation with the use of the atomic bomb in Japan?
I believe that even before we had been forced to join the war, that the conflict was inevitable, so I took charge of getting the U.S. Army ready for war, then reorganized and led the Army through the war. My association was largely indirect, and I had known about the atomic bomb project as far as October of 1941. However, in 1942, the project was turned over to the Army, where Leslie Groves took lead. As far as the actual use of the bombs, I believe the choice was up to the executive branch, seeing it was a more political than military decision.
What were your views on the use of the bomb? Did you support it?
Yes, I supported the use of the bomb completely. As a military man, my main objective is to figure out the best militaristic strategies. My views on the bombs are that they should be used on large naval bases, and if there are no results, to move on to larger manufacturing industries. I also said we should keep clear records and do everything possible to warn the Japanese that we intended to destroy such centers so that they were given the opportunity to leave and find safety.
Did the U.S. send any warnings to Japan and civilians?
Yes, the U.S. did drop a series of warning flyers in several cities of Japan, warning that various cities, if not all of Japanese cities, would be destroyed by American bombs. We even listed the potential sites with military installations and factories that manufactured military goods and told civilians to evacuate or beg their leader for surrender. On an American control radio station in Saipan, we aired similar warnings several times, asking them to cease military resistance before we employ the atomic bomb and forcefully end the war.
Could you tell me what was the Potsdam Declaration?
The Potsdam Declaration was an article that came out July 26. It was a document that underlined the terms of surrender for Japan. In our 13th point, we asked Japan to proclaim unconditional surrender in their armed forces, or the alternative is prompt and utter destruction.
It is said that you are in the process of creating a relief plan for post-war Europe. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, Truman was aware of the conditions in post-war Europe and decided he wanted to offer foreign aid to the countries. The main idea of the plan so far is to rebuild and strengthen European countries struggling to recover from the war and aid countries threatened by communist expansion. The plan is more of to create an enhanced future rather than just recover from the war. We want to modernize Europe, its industrial businesses and performance, and strengthen the war. We want to help. We're not sure about the budget or specifics of how exactly this will happen yet, since the plan is still in finalization. However, we do know that for a fact the U.S. will help the recovery of Europe.
So it was under Truman's request that you create a plan to aid post-war Europe. And how would you describe President Truman as a person?
Truman believed that Europe was in such ruin it was in danger of becoming communist. So we developed a reconstruction plan, which came out on June 5th. Truman was determined to help Europe get over the devastation left from the war and progress past it. In my time working with Truman, I would deem him a strong-willed and dutiful leader. As a person, Truman is civilized and compassionate. He is the kind of man who, as a president, knows his duties and fulfills them meticulously, taking everything into consideration and keeping in mind what's best for his people.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
You have stated that you supported the usage of the bomb, is that correct?
Yes.
But you were not actually in charge of the research behind it and such things like that?
No, I only funded.
Okay. And did you believe or were even aware that research of the bomb and its showing it to the world through using it in Japan would have caused an arms race with other nations?
Yes.
Okay. And do you believe the U.S. would have been prepared for this?
Yes.
But then wouldn't that make them appear as an all-powerful nation that would have bombs at their disposal that they are willing to use against not only Russia, but anybody else who's also willing to create bombs?
Objection,
Yeah.
leading question.
Yes, leading questions are allowed in the cross-examination. Please answer the question.
Yes.
And you have you were the main person behind the Marshall Plan, is that correct?
Yes.
Which was willing to rebuild Western Europe, which was destroyed by the war.
Yes.
What about the Pacific Front, which is also largely destroyed by the war?
Our relations with Japan we wouldn't have been able to have Japan cooperate with us to help them recover past the war.
And how is it they have managed to do the same thing in Germany?
I believe that the people in Germany were willing to cooperate and work past it.
Your final question, please.
After having used the bomb, what would you have prepared to continue to have done in the Pacific Front? As in, after the bomb was used, what would have been the next step in Japan?
We had a land invasion that was planned.
Okay. No further questions.
Thank you very much. You may be seated. Your next witness, defense.
Defense calls upon Lieutenant Richard K. Sutherland.
Lieutenant Sutherland, to the stand, please. Lieutenant, is he in the audience? Yes. I remind you, you are under oath. Please take the stand. Your first question.
Do you believe MacArthur was a good choice for the attack on Japanese forces?
I think MacArthur is a very good general. He's very determined, and I wouldn't choose anyone else for to attack the Pacific.
What is your relationship with General MacArthur?
I've worked with him for many years, and I'm proud to have served with him.
Based on your past experience with the Japanese, do you think had they been given more time, they would have negotiated an end to the war?
Absolutely not. In all the battles I've witnessed from my men tell me, the Japanese fight to the very end. They will never surrender.
Do you think dropping the bomb was the right thing to do?
Of course it wasn't the right thing to do. We killed many people. The fact that I was part of it will most likely haunt me for the rest of my life. It was in fact necessary. I believe that just as many would have died had we sent our troops to Japan. Believe me when I say this, if our troops had reached Japan, they would have to fight not only soldiers but women and children as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Would you care to cross-examine this witness?
What was your relationship with the soldiers under your command?
Well, I like to think that I'm quite close to all my soldiers. Of course, I can't single them out, but I was an instructor earlier in my life, and I like to think I know what a soldier goes through in battle.
Did they know that you were willing or supporting the usage of the nuclear bomb to have ended the war?
I think they knew that me serving MacArthur, would make the right decision.
And what did they think about that?